I can see you.
Tonight, we are opening files related to the most intimate and terrifying of predators, the stalker. These 8 accounts have been cross-referenced with police reports, eyewitness testimony, and in some cases, evidence that was never meant to be seen by the public. Each case shares a common, chilling thread. The stalker possessed knowledge they could not have obtained by any normal means. They knew private conversations. They knew hidden fears. They knew things they simply shouldn't. What you are about to hear is a presentation of the facts as we have found them. Before we begin, ensure you are subscribed to the Nightmare Log and have notifications activated. The individuals in these files had no warning. You do. What we uncover here is not for the faint of heart, and you won't want to miss what we discover next. Case File NML 291, The Man with No Shadow. The subject of this file is Maya Petrova, a 28-year-old architectural draftsperson residing in apartment 4B of the Cedar Ridge complex. The date was October 17th. Maya lived alone, her only companion a tabby cat named Fig. Her life was a pattern of quiet routine: work, home, a nightly walk, and sleep. Her apartment was chosen for its security: a reinforced deadbolt on a solid core door, and a well-lit parking lot monitored by 2 cameras. On the evening of October 21st, Maya returned from her walk to find a single, dead rose lying precisely in the center of her welcome mat. It was fresh, but its stem had been meticulously stripped of all its thorns. Assuming it was a misplaced gift from a neighbor, she discarded it. The following evening, another rose awaited her. This time, the thorns were present and had been arranged in a small, tight circle around the flower's head. Maya reported the incident to building management. The hallway camera for her floor had been malfunctioning for a week, its feed a mess of digital static. There was no useful footage. That night, as she prepared for bed, her landline phone rang. This was a number only her parents and her bank had. On the other line was silence, followed by 3 soft taps, mimicking the exact rhythm she used to knock on Fig's food bowl each morning. The caller hung up. The next day, a typed note was slipped under her door. It read, "The deadbolt sticks in the rain. You should oil it." It had rained the night before, and she had indeed struggled with the lock, a fact she had mentioned to no one. Paranoia set in. Maya began to notice a man standing under a street lamp across from her building each night. He was too far away to make out any distinct features, just a silhouette. But he was always there, and he never moved. On October 27th, she arrived home from work to find her apartment filled with the sound of a music box. The source was a small, antique box that had belonged to her grandmother, stored at the very back of her closet. It was playing. As the melody tinkled, her phone rang. A hushed, calm voice spoke only one sentence. "I like it when you wear your hair down, Maya." Her hair was down. She was alone in her apartment. She ran to the window and looked down at the street lamp. The man was gone, but as she looked down, she saw his shadow, stretching long and black from the base of the lamp post, with no one there to cast it. Maya called the police. A full sweep of her apartment revealed no signs of forced entry. The only fingerprints on the music box were her own. The official report concluded she was the victim of an elaborate prank, likely by someone she knew. The building replaced the hallway camera. The phone calls and notes stopped. Maya moved out 2 weeks later. The official report lists the incidents as harassment by a person unknown. The Nightmare Log has classified it as a Class 2 observational entity. The subject displayed knowledge of private routines, access to a secured dwelling without physical entry, and an apparent control over its own physical representation. The entity, designated the Silhouette, remains at large. But the violation of a home is not the only way a predator can demonstrate its knowledge. Our next case comes from the small town of Oak Haven, where a young boy's imaginary friend began to recite secrets that were never meant to be spoken. Case file NML 308. Sarah and David Miller lived with their 6-year-old son, Leo, at 12 Willow Road in Oak Haven. Leo was a bright, imaginative child. In early November, he began speaking about a new friend named Mr. Whisper. Mr. Whisper, Leo said, lived in the woods at the edge of their property and liked to play games through the window at night. The Millers, assuming this was a typical childhood phase, thought little of it. On November 5th, during dinner, Leo looked at his father and said, "Mr. Whisper says your tummy hurts because you drink the brown bottle in the garage." David suffered from ulcers, which he treated with a secret stash of whiskey, a habit he had kept from his wife. Shocked into silence, David dismissed it as a lucky guess. Later that night, Sarah was tucking Leo into bed when he said, "Mr. Whisper is sad. He says the little girl in your tummy is sleeping forever." Sarah had suffered a miscarriage 2 years prior, a painful secret she and David had shared with no one, not even family. The Millers were now deeply alarmed. They forbade Leo from talking to Mr. Whisper. Leo would become upset, claiming Mr. Whisper would get lonely and angry. They began to notice things. The family dog would growl at Leo's closed bedroom door for no reason. The motion-activated light in the backyard would flick on multiple times a night, revealing nothing but the empty lawn. One morning, they found a child's handprint, smeared with what looked like damp earth, on the outside of Leo's second-story window. The final straw came on November 12th. Leo had a nightmare and climbed into his parents' bed. As Sarah lay awake, holding her son, she heard it. A faint, whispering voice, just audible outside their master bedroom window. It was reciting her wedding vows, word for word, in a flat, monotone drone. Then it began to recite the combination to the safe where they kept their important documents. A combination that existed only in her and David's memory. They looked at each other in pure terror. The voice knew things not even Leo could know. The Millers called the police the next morning. A search of the woods revealed nothing. No footprints, no disturbed earth. Officers found a single audio recorder placed on the windowsill outside Leo's room. It was cheap, store-bought, and empty. The official report suggests the family was the target of a sophisticated and cruel hoax, though no suspects were ever identified. The Millers installed heavy-duty blinds and moved Leo's room to the center of the house. The whispers eventually stopped. The official report lists the case as attempted burglary and harassment. The nightmare log has classified it as a mimetic parasite. The entity, designated Mr. Whisper, seemed to feed on private, shameful, or painful information, using it to forge a connection with a vulnerable host. Its methods suggest an intelligence that thrives on emotional distress. The case remains open. Case file NML 315. Our next file centers on Ben Carter, a 34-year-old long-haul truck driver. His rig, a 2018 Volvo VNL, was his second home, equipped with a Citizens band radio for communication with other drivers on the road. His route, I-90 across the northern United States, was one he knew by heart. The incident began on a routine overnight drive through South Dakota on November 3rd. At approximately 2:17 a.m., Ben's CB crackled to life with a burst of heavy static. Cutting through the noise was a calm, clear voice that gave his full name, his truck's license plate number, and his exact location on the highway. The voice said, "The deer will cross 1 mile ahead. Slow down, Ben Carter." Ben, assuming it was another driver with a fancy GPS system, shrugged it off. 90 seconds later, he crested a hill and had to brake hard for a small herd of deer standing in the road. For the next hour, the voice returned every 15 minutes. It never identified itself. It would simply state a fact it could not possibly know. It told him the winning lottery numbers from a ticket he had scratched off at a gas station 2 days prior. It recited the last text message he had sent to his wife. The voice began to describe the scenery he was about to pass. "You'll see a red barn with a collapsed roof on your right now." And it would be there. Ben began to feel a profound sense of dread. He was being narrated. He tried changing channels, but the voice was on every single one. It was in the radio itself. The breaking point came near the Minnesota border. The voice returned, but this time it sounded different, strained, almost sad. "Ben," it said, "your father's watch. The one you keep in the glove box. He wanted you to have it." He wasn't angry about the accident. Ben felt the blood drain from his face. His father had given him the watch just before dying in a car crash that Ben had caused. The guilt was his deepest, most private wound. He had never spoken of it to anyone, not even his wife. He grabbed the CB microphone and screamed, "Who are you?" After a long pause, the voice replied, its tone now flat and final, "I'm the one you're talking to, Ben. I've always been here." The radio then emitted a high-pitched whine and died completely. It never worked again. Ben reported the incident to the state police at the next truck stop. They found no evidence of tampering with his radio equipment. A check of CB traffic logs for that sector showed no unusual activity. The official report suggests Ben was likely suffering from highway hypnosis and an auditory hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation. The official report attributes the event to driver fatigue. The nightmare log has classified it as an auditory infestation. The entity, which seemed to be a form of intelligent, parasitic signal, displayed a deep, non-physical connection to its target and a terrifying ability to mine the deepest recesses of a human mind for personal information. The source of the transmission was never located. A voice on the radio can be turned off. A presence in your own home is a far more persistent threat. The following case details a stalking so subtle. The victim questioned her own sanity until the entity chose to make its intentions devastatingly clear. Case file NML 322. Chloe Ramirez, a 22-year-old barista, lived in a small, ground-floor studio apartment. She was cheerful, social, and had no reason to feel unsafe in her neighborhood. The case began on December 1st, a week after her birthday. Chloe arrived home from work to find a small, wrapped package on her kitchen table. Inside was a vintage brooch shaped like a hummingbird. It was beautiful, but she had no memory of buying it or receiving it as a gift. She assumed a friend had stopped by and left it as a surprise. She texted her thank yous, but everyone denied it. The next day, a first edition of her favorite childhood book was leaning against her front door. There was no note. The gifts kept coming. They were always left inside her locked apartment. a scarf that matched her eyes, a vinyl record by her favorite band. Each item was perfectly chosen, reflecting a deep knowledge of her personal tastes. But the knowledge soon turned darker. She found a bottle of her exact prescription anxiety medication on her pillow, but the label had been peeled off. She discovered a framed photograph on her bookshelf, a picture of herself, aged 8, on a swing set that had been torn down decades ago. The photo had been in a storage unit 2 states away. Fear replaced confusion. She changed her locks. She installed a camera pointed at her front door. The camera showed nothing. No one entered. Yet the gifts continued to appear. The final gift was left on the morning of December 24th. Chloe woke up and found a small, handmade doll sitting in a chair facing her bed. It had brown yarn for hair, just like hers. It was wearing a miniature replica of her work apron. And clutched in its fabric hands was a tiny, perfect replica of the key to her newly changed deadbolt. That was the intended message. Your locks are a joke to me. Your space is my space. There was no more doubt, no more rationalization. She was not being courted. She was being collected. Chloe did not call the police. She packed a single bag, left everything else behind, and drove to her parents' house in another city. She never returned to the apartment. A friend later went to collect her mail and reported that the apartment was exactly as she had left it, with one exception. All the gifts were gone. The only thing left on the kitchen table was the original vintage brooch, with its pin driven straight through the center of a photograph of Chloe and her parents at her college graduation. The official record contains no report, as the victim never filed one. The nightmare log has classified it as a Class 3 physical intrusion, nonviolent but psychologically devastating. The entity, designated the curator, demonstrates an ability to bypass physical barriers without detection and possesses an uncanny, archival knowledge of its subject's life. The case is considered active. Case File NML 337. This file concerns the Henderson family, Mark, Julia, and their infant daughter, Ella. They had just purchased and moved into their first home, a charming but old Victorian house on Elm Street, in mid-January. The house needed work, but they were thrilled by its character, including the antique speaking tubes, an old-fashioned intercom system of brass pipes and whistles that connected the kitchen to the upstairs bedrooms. 3 days after moving in, Julia was in the kitchen preparing a bottle when she heard a faint, staticky breath through the speaking tube that connected to the nursery. She assumed it was the house settling or a trick of the wind. The next day, as she passed the tube in the hall, she heard a faint, whispered word, cold. It was so soft she almost missed it. When she mentioned it to Mark, he dismissed it as old pipes contracting. The whispers became more frequent. They were never loud, always just on the edge of hearing. They would comment on mundane activities. Macaroni and cheese for dinner. The tube would sigh while Julia was boiling the pasta. He's snoring. It would whisper when Mark fell asleep on the couch. The voice was genderless, a dry rustle like old paper. They stopped using the tubes, stuffing rags into the openings. It didn't help. The voice just seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It began to comment on things it shouldn't know. The password is your mother's maiden name. It whispered from the study wall as Mark paid bills online. One night, Julia clearly heard it say, Ella's fever will break at 3:04 a.m. She hadn't even known the baby was sick yet. She checked, and Ella was indeed warm. The fever broke at 3:04 a.m. exactly. The horror peaked during a baby monitor malfunction. The video feed cut out, and only audio came through. Over the speaker, they heard the sound of rustling sheets and Ella's soft gurgles. Then, the familiar papery whisper spoke directly into the monitor's microphone, its voice clear and intimate in their bedroom. "She smells like lavender and milk. I like to watch her dream. Do you want to know what she dreams about?" The entity wasn't just in the walls. It was in their technology, in their private moments, watching their most vulnerable member. It wasn't just stating facts. It was luxuriating in its invasion. The Hendersons fled to a hotel that night. They brought in electricians, paranormal investigators, and priests. No cause was found. The official, rational explanation was a combination of high-frequency sound waves from faulty wiring causing auditory hallucinations and a bizarre coincidence of a baby monitor picking up a stray radio signal. The family moved out 1 month later. The house remains unsold. The official explanation is listed as environmental factors and mass hysteria. The nightmare log has classified it as a structural mimic. The entity seems to have a symbiotic relationship with the house itself, using its physical and electronic systems as a nervous system to observe and interact. Its knowledge wasn't just stolen, it was experienced firsthand from a vantage point inside the home. The entity, designated the architect, is considered bound to the location. A presence in the home uses the structure itself to observe, but some predators require no such anchor. Their focus is absolute, their attention personal and inescapable, as our next case file demonstrates. Case file NML 340. Alex Chun was a 29-year-old freelance photographer who traveled frequently for work. The case began in London, following a major international photography conference in early February. Alex was outgoing, comfortable in crowds, and highly observant, a trait that would soon become a curse. While reviewing his shots from the conference's opening night, Alex noticed a man in the background of several photos. He was unremarkable, average height, average build, wearing a plain gray jacket. The unusual part was his expression. In every single picture, he was staring directly, unabashedly, into Alex's lens, while everyone else was engaged in conversation or looking at the speakers. Alex wrote it off as a strange coincidence. A week later, Alex was in Paris for another job. While taking street photography near the Seine, he saw the man again. Same gray jacket, same direct stare, 50 yards away, leaning against a lamppost. Alex felt a chill. He raised his camera and zoomed in. The man didn't flinch. He simply raised one hand and gave a small, slow wave. Alex left immediately. The following day, in Brussels, the man was there. In the airport, standing in the security line, 3 people behind him. Alex took a picture of his own boarding pass and sent it to a friend as a joke, saying, "If I go missing," he arrived in Berlin. The man was standing outside his hotel, looking up at his window. The true terror wasn't the man's presence. It was his knowledge. Alex began receiving emails to his private, professional account. They contained no text, only attachments. One was a sound file of the message Alex had left for his mother that morning from his hotel room. Another was a scanned copy of a receipt from a cafe Alex had visited an hour prior, with the item "black coffee" circled. The final email contained a single photograph. It was a selfie Alex had taken with his phone in the mirror of his Berlin hotel bathroom just minutes before. In the reflection, over Alex's shoulder, The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and in the darkness of the crack, a single eye was visible, staring back at him. Alex went to the German Polizei. They were sympathetic but could do little. The man had never threatened him or spoken to him. The emails were untraceable, sent from public networks. There was no crime to report. A private security consultant hired by Alex's family found no evidence of tracking devices on his person or in his luggage. The stalker's ability to anticipate his movements and access private spaces and information was absolute. Alex abandoned his career and returned to his hometown, moving back in with his parents. The emails stopped the day he left Europe. The official report from multiple international agencies lists the case as targeted harassment by an unknown party. The nightmare log has classified it as a perceptual predator. The subject displays an impossible ability to track its target across international borders and access secure digital and physical spaces without detection. Its actions suggest it is less a person and more a force of focused attention, making its victim aware of its omnipresence. The case is considered dormant, but not closed. Case File NML 355. This file details the experience of Lena Petrovich, a 38-year-old lead software engineer for a major tech firm. Lena was precise, logical, and valued her privacy above all else. Her digital security was impeccable, randomized passwords, two-factor authentication on every account, and a strict policy of never sharing personal information online. The case began in late February. Lena received a notification that a new device had logged into her professional cloud storage. The location was listed as her own home IP address. Assuming it was a glitch, she forced a log out of all devices and changed her password. The next day, she received a password reset email for her personal email, an account not linked to her professional life. The reset request had come from her own home IP address again. A cold dread settled in her stomach. Someone, or something, was inside her network. The intrusions were never destructive, only observant. Her smart TV would turn on by itself and briefly display a folder of her private vacation photos before switching back to a news channel. The digital assistant in her kitchen would recite her grocery list back to her in a perfect mimic of her own voice, a list she had only typed into her phone. She began to find small, logical changes. Her alarm clock was set 7 minutes later than she preferred. The temperature on her smart thermostat was lowered by 2 degrees. It was as if a ghost was moving in, subtly reshaping her environment to its liking. The most chilling event was a single, blank text message sent from her phone to her own number, time-stamped for 3 a.m., when she had been asleep. The situation escalated when Lena's doppelganger appeared at work. A security guard waved to her in the parking lot at 8:05 a.m. The problem was, Lena had been stuck in traffic and didn't arrive until 8:30. A colleague asked if she was feeling better, mentioning that she had looked pale when she'd come in to grab a file from her desk the previous Saturday, a day Lena had spent miles away at her sister's house. The entity wasn't just in her digital space. It was beginning to impersonate her in the physical world, using knowledge only she possessed to access her life. The final straw was a performance review email from her boss, praising her for the insightful and proactive suggestions she'd emailed him the night before. She had sent no such email. Lena took a leave of absence from work. She hired a team of elite cybersecurity experts. They found nothing. No malware, no breached firewalls, no evidence of any remote access tool. Their final report stated that the events were either an inside job by someone with unparalleled skill or, they reluctantly suggested, a series of elaborate pranks or mental episodes on Lena's part. Lena disconnected every smart device in her home and now uses a basic flip phone. The impersonations have stopped. The official report suggests high-level corporate espionage or psychological issues. The nightmare log has classified it as a digital doppelganger. The entity displayed an ability to bypass all known forms of digital security, manipulate private data, and perfectly mimic its target's behavior and knowledge to infiltrate both digital and physical spaces. Its motives remain unclear, but its capability is terrifying. The case is ongoing. A digital ghost can mimic a life, but the most profound violations are often the most personal. Our final case is perhaps the most disturbing in the log, as the stalker's knowledge did not come from watching the present, but from remembering a past the victim herself had tried to forget. Case file NML 362. Zoe Miller was a 31-year-old librarian who had built a quiet, peaceful life for herself. She had moved across the country 5 years prior, seeking a fresh start after a traumatic event in her early 20s that she worked hard to bury. She never spoke of it. Her new friends, her job, her world, knew nothing of the person she used to be. On the morning of March 10th, Zoe found a small, wrapped box on the steps of the library. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. Hanging from it was a single charm, a tiny, detailed rolling pin. Zoe's hands began to shake. She had worked at a bakery 10 years ago, a job she hadn't listed on any resume since she moved. That evening, a letter arrived at her home with no return address. It contained a faded photograph of her from that bakery, smiling behind a counter, a smudge of flour on her cheek. Written on the back in neat, familiar handwriting was, "I always loved your smile." The gifts and letters kept coming, each one pulling a thread from a past life she had sealed shut. A mixed CD containing the exact playlist that had played in her old car. A pressed flower of a species that only grew in her hometown. The letters began to include details no one could know. They mentioned the name of her first pet, a hamster that had died when she was 9. They referenced a private joke she had shared with a high school friend she'd lost touch with. This wasn't a current stalker. This was someone, or something, that had been watching her for decades, waiting. The letters never threatened. They were wistful, nostalgic, and deeply possessive. "Remember how we'd talk until sunrise?" one read. She had no memory of any such person. The climax came with the final package. It contained a small, stuffed teddy bear, worn with age. It was the bear she had slept with every night as a child, the one that had been lost in a move when she was 12. It should have been in a landfill 1,000 miles away. Tucked under the bear's arm was a note. It read, "You can't outrun your history, Zoe. I am your history, and I've finally found you." It was signed with a nickname her father had called her when she was very small, a name she was certain she had never written down or spoken to anyone in her adult life. Zoe did not call the police. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that no authority could help her. This was beyond laws and jurisdictions. She packed a single bag, emptied her bank account, and disappeared. She left no forwarding address, cut all contact with everyone she knew, and vanished into the country. There has been no further communication. For Zoe Miller, the stalking is over, because she has made herself cease to exist. There is no official report. The nightmare log has classified this as an archival entity. The stalker demonstrated a comprehensive, intimate, and decades-spanning knowledge of the victim's life, accessing memories that even she had suppressed. Its ability to procure physically lost objects suggests an influence over reality itself. This case represents the ultimate nightmare, a predator that doesn't stalk the person you are, but the person you were, and believes it still owns you. The case is closed, not by resolution, but by the total disappearance of the victim. These 8 cases from the log, from the silhouette without a form to the entity that remembered a forgotten life, demonstrate a terrifying and consistent pattern. The world is not as safe as we are led to believe. The most dangerous predators are not those who threaten you in a dark alley, but those who operate in the spaces between seconds, in the blind spots of your security cameras, and in the quiet corners of your own mind. They do not need to break down your door. They already have the key. They know your fears, your secrets, and your history. Their power lies not in force, but in knowledge. Knowledge they should not, and could not, possibly possess. The truth of these breaches is often hidden in plain sight, in the places we feel most secure, our homes, our cars, our private thoughts. The official reports will offer rational explanations: sleep deprivation, pranks, coincidence, mental fatigue. But we at the Nightmare Log know that sometimes the simplest answer is not the correct one. Sometimes the truth is staring directly into the lens, waving slowly from a crowd, or whispering to you from inside your own walls. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Check your privacy settings. Be mindful of the digital footprints you leave behind. But more importantly, believe people when they tell you they feel watched. Believe them when they say they are being followed by something they cannot explain. The most dangerous monsters are not the ones that look monstrous. They are the ones who look like everyone else. Or worse, look like no one at all. They are the ones who know things they shouldn't. If you have a case you believe belongs in the log, a story of a stalker who knew too much, describe it in the comments below. Your testimony could be the crucial piece of evidence we need to investigate a future entry. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. The archives are vast, and we have only just begun to explore them. You won't want to miss what we discover next. Stay vigilant. Lock your doors. But remember, as these files have shown you, that is often not enough. This has been a presentation from the Nightmare Log. Until next time, try to sleep,